For those of you who were not at the previous workshop, we began by talking about internationalisation. And I think when you put together a project like this in a network and you have to come up with the themes, it makes it sound as though you're going to do one thing at a time. And I don't think that as either industry or academic professionals, we tend to do one thing at a time. They all interconnect. But notionally today, our main focus is on digital innovation, recognising that that has its own internationalising aspect as well. We have quite a packed first day in terms of presentations and a much more discursive, open second day. So I'm hoping that we have plenty of time over coffee breaks, over dinner this evening and again tomorrow to hold on to and to go deeper in some of the discussions today. So I'm going to move on because we're already in danger of falling behind in our schedule to begin the first session. Our case study presentation, and I'm really thrilled that we've managed to again retain this focus of having two different broadcasters and small nations in dialogue here. So I'm going to ask Hugh and GrabYer from S4C first of all to do a short presentation around some of the digital innovations that they have been harbouring and developing here. And then I'm going to hand over to Periscope and Leash to do the same in terms of development in Teji Cacha, and then we're all going to come together and have a discussion about that. Okay. So, without any further ado, I will hand over to Hugh Marshall first of all.
Diolch. So hello, Bob. Hello everybody. Dydd Gwyl Dewi hapus. Happy St Dewi Day. I've decided to reclaim the name Dewi because you wouldn't call it a David Dewi, so that's my plan for today. So I'm head of digital development. I'm one of those people who's actually cursed of having the word digital in his job title, and one of the things I've been trying to do well here is actually getting everybody to actually accept digital as something that just touches everybody's work aspect. So part of my plan is actually make myself redundant in order to get rid of that, because I think what's key is that digital should be just a natural part of everybody's work. So last year I was charged by Ian Jones, the Chief Executive of S4C, to develop a new digital strategy because we didn't have a formal strategy to work off. So this meeting has come round quite handily for me because I'm actually in the process now of preparing my report on where we're at. So basically, just from our strategic point of view, the strategy itself has 5 main areas that it looks at. So first one priority is meeting the audience's needs. So obviously, the audience is key for everything we do. Second is innovation. So how do we use innovation in order to engage with audiences? Integrating social media, because prior to coming up with a strategy, even though we use social media, we didn't actually have a person responsible for social media and to be strategic. So part of my strategy was the appointment of somebody, and great is the result. So it's good that you write a strategy and something happens. The other one, and I think this is important, is becoming more important, is increasing income for S4C, but also to support the growth of the digital economy in Wales. And finally, the final bit, which is, again, trying to make myself redundant, developing a culture of digital as part of everybody's everyday work. So when I was going through this, there were actually 16 action points. So if you just bear with me, I'll just go through these quickly. Number 1, appoint a social media manager and SEO manager. GrabYer. So that one was done. Restructuring our output for the under 14s and integrating S4C content into the educational space. So a lot of work has gone on in this place. I don't know if you're aware of Hub. Hub is the All Wales learning platform. So every pupil and teacher in Wales has access via Hub. If you just Google Hub Welsh Education, there's a public-facing site. You can go in and have a look at that. So obviously it's very resource-driven. Video is a big driver. The Donaldson report, which is reviewing the curriculum in Wales, has come up with from 2018 that digital competency will be part of the curriculum alongside literacy and numeracy. So it's interesting that we're actually making that on with parity with literacy and numeracy. But as part of digital literacy, it's not just a case of how to code. It's about creating video content. How do you actually reach audiences? How do you make content in all its different aspects? So again, we're moving along there, and hopefully within the next couple of months, S4C will have a presence on the Hub portal, and we'll be getting our content into there. and we're also working with getting our archive available for schools. Appointing a digital content coordinator. So Nia Evans, who worked as my assistant, who was a digital assistant, even though she was real. So she applied for that post and got that. So she's now responsible for overseeing our content, because now so much of our content now is short form video content. Somebody needs to manage that, how we manage our YouTube channels, how we get that content out across social media. So she works very closely with GrabYer from that perspective. We also created a fund, a part of my digital budget, to actually commission new short form content. So again, with these things, the fund has been set up, and we're now actually in discussions with companies about producing that content. And what's been interesting, because the nature of the audience and the platforms are moving along so quickly. So when we started this off, we were looking for specifically short form content. What we're actually working on now are discussion shows for young people using 360-degree YouTube video. So that wasn't even on our radar when this was started. So we're actually coming up with ideas, and we're very flexible. So they come up and say, we want to do this. I just say yes. Because what's key is they understand the audience. There's a very young team who are driving this content. They understand the audience. They're creating content that's relevant for them. And what's vitally important is obviously that it's in the Welsh language, and it's the normalisation of Welsh language across these platforms. Developing technology that locates the user within our S4C digital platforms. This is key, because I think we are, as a nation in Wales, we are very parochial. So we are interested in what's going on around us. A lot of our content is localised. So how do you make sure that if you live somewhere that you can get items from that day's output that's relative to you and get in? It was interesting, the National Library of Wales put the newspaper archive prior to 1914 all online, digitised. Of course, first thing people went in to look for, where they live, where they were born. So we know that this is something that draws them in. But it's also raising awareness, because there are lots of people probably aren't aware, people aren't watching S4C, that we are creating content that's local to them. Develop a digital marketing strategy, because again, we were very traditional in our marketing, very press focused, very print focused. So again, this is something, there's a reorganisation going on. Gwyn Williams has been appointed as a new head of marketing and engagement, and we are now looking again using sort of digital platforms. And again, this is something that GrabYer is working close in order to make people aware of our content. And I think it'll be interesting when GrabYer does some of the case studies, you can see examples of where it's actually working for us already. Developing HTML5 technology. One of the people ask all the time, obviously you can watch GrabYer Click, our catch-up service, on mobile, on desktop. But you can't watch us on smart TVs and other connected devices. We are on the iPlayer, but again, you've got to find us within the iPlayer. We're on somebody else's platform, basically. And moving forward, if we want to have that information about who's watching us, linking that into our login system and knowing what people are watching, that's something that we need to develop ourselves. So that's something that's high on our priorities, and we're developing our own video player with a login system that's going to come from that. Investing in new distribution platforms. The main one we've been using is GrabYer. GrabYer can mention that. But it's interesting, by investing a relatively small monthly sum in a platform that already exists, that allows you to get your content to an audience quickly. If we were developing that internally, we could have done it, but it would have taken us months, and we just haven't got the human resource to do it. So we invest strategically in order to achieve specific aims. So those were the main areas that we were looking at, and also the other main one is how we actually connect with the 7 to 15-year-old audience, because we know our audiences are very true to Q, our preschool service. They're basically plonked in front of the television by their parents, and they watch it. And as I know myself, having a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old daughters, the 7-year-old, all of a sudden I realised when she was 6, oh my God, she can learn to read. So all of a sudden the EPG wasn't nonsense to her anymore. She could navigate her way around. So it's highly frustrating for me. My children spend all their time watching YouTube Kids, watching somebody unboxing toys in English. So one of the key things we're looking at is how do we encourage UGC to get young people to create that content. So we've invested, along with Welsh Government, in projects like GameTube, which is showing kids how they do walkthroughs for Minecraft, how they do walkthroughs for computer games in Welsh, and upload it. Because what we make them aware is, if you're making that walkthrough in English, you're one of a billion videos on YouTube. You do it in Welsh, you've actually got more of a chance of getting your content noticed and watched. So So you make doing something in Welsh a USP, and that it's important to them. So those were the main things. So it's quite interesting going through these things. You know, we have actually achieved quite a lot when you consider that we are a very small team. We've got 2 web developers working on the back end. We've got 2 web developers working on the front end. You've got me in charge of that department, Gweir the social media, and Mia who overlooks content. So we're very small, we're very live, but there's obviously more and more pressure on us as a broadcaster to be across more platforms. And this is something you have to try and relate to the audience. People's expectations of us are like the BBC. We're not the BBC. We haven't got £3.5 billion a year to spend on platforms and on things like the iPlayer. But that's what's interesting for us. How do we then cooperate with people like the BBC and people like TG Caha? How do we work together and collectively to get these technologies into people? So I think we just show you a couple of interesting examples. And one of the big challenges for us, and this is something I've discussed at length, is language and technology is the threat to minority languages by technology. I think everybody's familiar with Siri. So I'm going to see now, do a little experiment if this works. Phone Bethan.
No match found.
So Bethan is my wife. Unfortunately, I've got an excuse then. But it's just a simple example of Bethan as a name is quite simple. If I had said, you know, if I say Bethan, I've got a chance that it will actually find it. But it shows you how we're having to adapt our language in order for technologies to find us. Apple TV now, I've got Apple TV in the house, it's actually got a button now speaking to it, says show me the episode of Breaking Bad when whatever happened, and it finds it for me. I speak into it Welsh, it has no idea what's going on. The threat to us is obviously, A, it makes our content potentially invisible in the household, because you say public home, it doesn't know what you're saying. But also what it means is it's turning the language in the household into English, because it is the language, the Internet of Things, you're talking to everybody. So one of the key things, and what we're looking at now, and it's the top of my priorities, is developing the technologies in order for people to be able to speak to technology and for it to understand it. And there's a deeper, more important element to this, where digitisation of content comes in. We're looking now at getting our content into schools via Hub. Well, if they want to search that content, it's using, at the moment, you know, the easiest way of creating the metadata and the transcripts for that content is subtitle files. Well, we only subtitle about 10% of our content in Welsh, 70% of it's in English. So what you don't want is people searching for Welsh content in English because of that element. So how do you, when you're digitising that tape, how does it create that transcript and that metadata that's discoverable? And I think moving forward, this is something that's key, and I think that's where it's important that we're together, because we all have these discussions. I have discussions with companies, Welsh Government has discussions with companies, but how do we then pool our resources in order to put pressure on people in order to help with those platforms? I was looking up Twitter and Siri for languages they support. So if you look at Twitter, I set up an advertising account. So as part of the advertising account, you can target people through language. So the languages they support: Arabic, English, Spanish, Persian, Finnish, French, Hindi, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Dutch, Norwegian, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Swedish, German and Chinese. It's a very small proportion of languages. So if you're looking at something like Danish is a big, you know, is a proper language. If you're putting it on that level, they can't target through that. So when people complain, I can't promote, you know, in Welsh, you think, well, you know, there are big languages who can't promote through Welsh because they only support those platforms. And it's quite similar actually. If you then go into Siri, looking at the languages, it supports Arabic, Chinese, Danish. It does support Danish. You can speak Danish into Siri. Dutch, English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Norwegian, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, Swedish, Thai, Turkish. So again, there's lots of substantial languages that aren't on that list. They're businesses. YouTube, we've got Welsh language content on YouTube. We've discussed them about having a Welsh language interface. They're saying, well, we'll create a Welsh language interface if people upload content in Welsh. They need to see the demand for it. So that's why it's key that we get content on there, because basically they've got a list of languages and then they'll do them once they actually see there's a volume of traffic there. So again, there's a responsibility in us to make sure we get content on YouTube to Welshify it, because if people see that it's a Welsh language, 80% of young people use YouTube as their search engine to find to find music. So again, if you want to put Welsh language music on there, having that space and that interface to do that is vital. So although it's not much of a, it's explaining what we're doing from a strategic point of view, but it's also explaining the challenges that we, as a small language, but also as a small organisation, that actually faces us on a day-to-day basis. Because if you actually look at what the TV or broadcast or content on the internet in 2026 will be, the majority of that content will be delivered online. There'll be loads of new platforms, but those platforms, everybody will expect us to be on those. With every platform, there is an expense, there's a cost, there's a human resource, and this is something that people need to understand. If we can do it, we could do it. I could be on every smart TV, every connected device tomorrow if we were paying out $120,000 a year with a company. But we haven't got that resource. We've got to decide and target that resource. So, those are the challenges that face us. So anyway, enough of my boring numbers and stats. So Sally Mally is a famous Welsh character. Sally Mally Q on Twitter is a spoof account that swears a lot and it just basically spouts a lot of filth. So as you can see from the language is quite sort of joint. We could, if we wanted to, get this account closed down. But you see, it's got 17,000 people like Sally Mally. Hundreds of people share and like her comments. But the audience that this attracts are the audience we want to target. It's young Welsh people. Maybe they don't use the Welsh themselves on social media, but they will share content from other sources. So how do we tap in? So it's clear there is a diaspora out there who do use the language, who do like that kind of content, but how do you tap into that psyche and market to these people? But what's handy from, again, Gweir can explain more, but there is potential to actually use data like that. If you've got a young people's project, well, you want to just target the people who like Sally Mally, because at least then there's a good chance you're actually hitting people who understand that. So C translation. If you get a chance, have a look. It is quite interesting. But, anyway, so I'll hand you over to Gweir.
I'm just going to focus in on one main challenge. Then this opens up into small challenges underneath. So the main challenge, how do we turn high reach? So anyone can have reach. You can pay £1,000 to have 100,000 reach. It's simple math, but the actual secret is to get that engagement from what you're paying for. So you can hand out 100,000 flyers, but if 100,000 people don't look at it, then it's pointless. So how do we do this? So the first thing we did here with the marketing team was look at how often they were posting, how often they were doing things, and turned out they were doing sporadically 5 posts a day, sometimes no posts a day. Sometimes there were 10 posts on one day back in 2014. So we basically cut it all down and said twice a day. And that's it. Twice a day on Facebook, and that's all we're going to do. What this forced the team to do was to think about what they were actually doing. So rather than just posting anything out, just handing out the flyers on the street, should we say, they were actually thinking about what those people were going to do with it, because they had less time with these people. So from this, I can go this here now. But if you compare the stats from November 2014 to February 2015, so a 4-month period last year, a 4-month period this year, there's been a 180% increase in engagement. So it certainly worked. The next step for us now, though, is to double our reach again, because what was happening is we've decreased the amount of messages that are going out, and because of that we've seen a decrease in the reach as well. But what's happened is the engagement obviously has doubled. So the next step for us is to take that reach and double it again. So how do we do this? What do they do to the messages to get this doubling in reach? So we looked at the actual content we were sharing. We saw that, as everyone knows, a few clips go viral on the internet. So video has increased dramatically. Facebook is now equal to YouTube with the amount of views it gets online. So we decided to bring in tools that would enable our marketing team to clip out all the videos from our internal system called BSM. So on BSM, people upload all their video content that goes out on TV. So we gave the marketing team access to all this content and the ability to take out this content and use it to, as they wanted. So they could create GIFs, they could clip out the funny bits, they can clip out the tries from the rugby. And these clips were getting, rather than hundreds of views now, we were getting thousands of views all of a sudden. And all this together added to this mass engagement boost that we've had over the last 6 to 7 months. The next challenge for me, myself, was to kind of prove that this had happened. So Hugh brought in a system called GrabYer. Now initially this system was going to clip out our goals, our rugby tries for the football, in our sport department, and all our production companies that do sport could share them out on social media straight away. It was a live clipping tool. So as the feed was coming in, a live feed to our channel from the online was coming into GrabYer, we could clip it out and share it instantly online. But what we didn't realise at the time was that this GrabYer tool had an upload feature as well and an analytical feature. So what this enabled us to do was to get all our production companies a login for GrabYer. So every individual production company that SOC work with have access to GrabYer. And what it's essentially become is some sort of cloud for all our video content. So they upload to GrabYer, and anyone and us can share that content out wherever we want it to go. By doing that, what GrabYer does is it collects all the stats into one place. So we've gone from reporting on thousands of views, thousands of reach, to reporting on millions. So last month alone we had about 3 million reach on our video content, about 500,000 views, as opposed to reporting back in 2014 that we had 10,000 views on all our content.
But it's worth coming in there, because obviously now we've got that content there. Our challenge now is how do you match up the effectiveness of those views with actually people viewing online or on our linear service, because it is something that's difficult to quantify, but it's data and stuff that needs to be done. So that's something we're looking at. Sorry, hold on.
So can I just clarify the currency being used? You talk about engagement, reach and views. How do you measure those three things?
Right then, so the reach is the potential amount of people who have seen your content, pretty much. So this can vary from someone scrolling down the screen and just stopping for a second or so on your content, not necessarily seeing it, it's just the potential that they have. Views on GrabYer is calculated by someone actually stopping on your video and watching it, because it autoplays in the system. This is why GrabYer is more effective than just putting a link to the YouTube up. It's an autoplay system. It's expanded video, it's called. So it autoplays, and if someone's watched that for 3 seconds, then it counts as a view on GrabYer. Engagement, I was talking about engagement on Facebook. We're using something called Social Sprout. We did have Hootsuite on board, but we've changed over to Social Sprout. When I say engagement, I mean anyone who's liked, shared, commented on a post, or done something with it. Even clicking on a post is engagement. So they've done something with that post, meaning that it just proves to us that they've seen it.
So you explained that you've had a huge increase in engagement because of the campaigns you've been running.
If I look here now, I'll give you so the engagement figure from April till about April 2013 to April 2014 was 0.06%, and the figure now is 0.43. So we've gone up. What's that? Times 600-700% over the last year. So that's how we calculate engagement. So if I talk in stories created being engagement, it was 21,000 at period 1, and now it's 60,000. So
And you explained that you reduced the number of daily postings on Facebook
yes,
so that people develop a more strategic approach.
yeah. So the next
How
move.
did that obviously generated an increase in engagement. It's very counterintuitive.
Mm.
You think not.
Yeah.
Mm.
So how did that work? I mean, it's
Less
Yeah,
is more.
Yeah,
less
well,
is more.
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it forced the team to think about the two things. So rather than just posting anything they want 8 times a day, they were thinking about what they were going to do with these 2 slots that they had on Facebook. Sometimes they only had 1. So it's more of an exercise to get them thinking outside the box. As in,
Or they're thinking in terms of how do I make this post
exactly,
better,
yeah.
greater
Yeah.
engagement for it.
Rather than marketing,
Yeah.
how can I get those people sharing?
But we also we don't just look at the numbers, because obviously numbers are nice.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at something like Henno, which is our daily magazine, so we gave them access to the tool, having discussed with the production team for a long period of time about using short form content on other platforms in order to promote their programme. And they just couldn't get their heads around it. So we gave them GrabYer and they looked at it. Oh my God, it was like children in a sweet shop. They were posting everything. And it was just like this splurge of content. So again, they were excited, which is great though, because they actually seen the value of it. But we look at those clips, and it's not just a case of if something gets several thousand views, you look at how many likes it's had as well. So you can see this correlation. It's not just, they're just 3-second views. You can actually see people have engaged with it. So we had one about the smallest cafe in Wales, in Glanamman, 40,000 views, 500 likes. So you know the people have actually looked at that. An item on London Fashion Week, 300 views, 10 likes. So it's obviously people haven't actually engaged with that content. So it's not just the actual number, but also how do you use that then? It's saying, well, the fashion items on here are just not getting any views. So A, why bother putting fashion items on there? But B, is there something about how we make fashion items that the audience aren't engaging with? So you can use it as not just a promotion, but also as a tool to understand, how they can improve their output. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Any other comments on what we did there with the decreasing in output as such? The next step obviously is increasing. So going up to that 3rd slot. We wouldn't go more than 3 times a day. It would just be bugging the audience, if anything. We don't want to be intrusive.
Yeah.
That's the balance you've got to have on social media. It's a permissive marketing tool. They've given you permission to be in their lives as such now, because social media is so every day.
It would bug them if you were too often on the newsfeed.
Exactly, yeah.
This is the issue of language as well, because with Twitter, because of the size of the message you can get in there, we tweet everything bilingually. So we do a Welsh message and an English message. With Facebook, you can do it bilingually because there's enough space to do that. But there is this, and this is something I just personally put out there every now and again. That's what Twitter polls are great for. Would you like to see, Welsh only, English only, bilingual? And it is, it does split people. But again, the majority prefer to see S4C doing it in both languages, because what they're saying is, if you're doing that to the, to 20-odd thousand users, and a lot of them don't speak Welsh, it's actually exposing them to the Welsh language. So it's that positivity. But I can see the flip side of it. Every time I go in there as a Welsh speaker, I get every message twice. So you've got to, it's a balance of doing it. But that's where, sort of less is more, because at least if there's less, there's less of an annoyance there. But you need to be strategic in order to make sure that message comes out. And the fact that we do boost and promote some posts as well, because you know that it's actually going to get in front of the right eyeballs.
Yeah, and when you are boosting any of your content, you need to be looking at the engagement stats to it, because again, it's, do you print 100 flyers or do you print 100,000 flyers? If it's not being read, then it's pointless. So it's really important that the content is strong in the first place. We don't just say we've got 100,000 reach. The engagement is also more important.
I think
Wait,
one
is
of
that
the...
right?
Oh, sorry.
So,
You want to go ahead? I'll come in later.
is there a particular social media that you think is more effective? You mentioned Twitter, you mentioned Facebook, YouTube.
Yeah.
Is there a particular one that can make your content
As
more
it
widespread?
Well, Facebook and Twitter are pretty much neck and neck with us at the moment. We post less on Facebook. We post 5 times a day on Twitter at the most. But the engagement stats are pretty similar at the moment, until, of course, we bring up Facebook again. As in, we increase the amount of times we post and the reach we're going to receive. So Facebook is going to pass Twitter in the next few months. But they're definitely the 2 main outputs. we're obviously looking to the future now, and Snapchat and Instagram and Periscope on the side is the way we're trying to take this. So we've got our offline video content going on, and sometimes as live, but now we're looking towards what we can do with these new. Periscope is a live streaming app. Can we bring this into our broadcasting as a second screen in any way? Of course, SOC did have a second channel, and like ITV2 now, as in we always watch Take Me Out on a Saturday night. We always switch over to ITV2 to watch the gossip one. As in, can we bring in that sort of idea with Periscope?
And I think something like Snapchat, because traditionally we were focusing on a younger demographic with Twitter and Facebook. Well, putting your energies, obviously you need to speak with different audiences, with different languages, dependent on the platform. So that's why we've been looking at what TG Carb are doing with Snapchat, because we've seen clearly there's been a shift of the audience from platforms. I run a couple of accounts on Twitter just to sort of test the market of stuff. And you see, a year and a half ago, if you put a message out, it would get 100, 150 retweets or favourites, with a lot of those from young people. They're getting, it's getting less of a volume of likes and retweets, but it's from an older demographic, so it's clear that younger audience, they've left, they've gone, they're somewhere else. So that's why we're looking at something like Snapchat, but again, you need to have a strategic, it's no point saying, we're going on Snapchat. Right, well, what's the content? How does that fit in with... So this is where, across content and commissioning, we need to work out what we're doing. And it was interesting, I don't know, hopefully not stealing from Leash, but the fact with how they recruited Snapchat was being very linear, by going to an event with a big image and getting people to sign up. So that's something we've taken away from there. We're going to go to the Earth and the Eisteddfod and do that recruitment, but then make sure we've got that content, relevant content, available to that audience, and then give up on Facebook and Twitter for that audience. We just put all our energy into Snapchat, because we can't spread ourselves, otherwise you're just spreading yourself thinly and you're just wasting your time. You're better off doing one thing and doing it really, really well.
Snapchat is an exciting prospect for us, as in the next thing coming up with us is a Lle. There's 2 sets of people going on an European tour, so we're going to give them both access to the account, and they're going to just talk to each other through Snapchat, and the younger audience can have a snapshot of a programme on the leader, and then when it's aired in April or September or whatever, they know exactly what's going on.
Sorry, Elaine.
Yeah.
I just want to make like a state the obvious observation, I suppose, but that really what I can see happening now is with GrabYer and those kinds of technologies that enable video content to sit more happily in social media as it is now, that this enables minoritized language television to reclaim what it had in the past before we had social media that was literacy dependent. Yeah. And so this is what I've taken from what you've just
and I think the other thing, because we know statistically when people come to the S4C website, the majority go into the English language version, because the reason behind that is even somebody like me who's a fluent Welsh speaker, first language, when I go into the post office to get a form, I pick up the Welsh form, I try with the Welsh bit, and it's just too hard for me. I go to the English one because it's an easier language, it's just the reading age of people, and that's something we need to look at from a content, but because that people can speak it and understand it, orally, so it's a great tool, and it is, like I say, it's reclaiming that space. You're not dependent on language. But that's the other thing that's interesting now with Facebook is subtitling. Because people don't want to press it in order to hear the audio, then subtitles are coming into it now, and you can see people putting subtitles. You can be on the train, you can watch it without disturbing other people. So again, that gives another challenge to us then. Well, what languages do we subtitle them, and do we create more than one version? So
most of our content has to be geo-blocked to the UK only, so getting outside the UK is a challenge legally as such. So GrabYer automatically geo-blocks all our content, and the only issue with that is sometimes we get people who have their IP addresses on their phones mess up, and even though they're in Llangrannog, that in West Wales, it tells GrabYer that they're not, so they can't see our content. But most of our followers on Facebook are from Wales. The second largest community is actually in London, so we do have pockets of communities that have left Wales, but to be honest, our engagement stats from those communities sometimes rival the ones in Wales, so it's obvious that more passionate. For
And from a viewing
sharing.
point of view, when we've gone on platforms like Virgin, we've seen our audiences, it's actually increasing in England. You know, that we're getting large viewings out. So what's the saying? Gwell Cymro oddi cartre. You know, so basically, because we take it for granted, we're here, a Welsh language SLC is here. But if you're outside of Wales, then it is actually an access point to you from, you know, giving you your cultural compass, whatever. So we find that, you know, there's an interest there and getting out there. I was just looking, because we drill down into Facebook stats. If you look at people who actually tick the Welsh language box, so there's 161,000 registered accounts in the UK who've ticked the box. Over 50% of those are between 16 and 25. But if you actually look at what the amount of people in Wales, for example, who've got Facebook accounts, it's 2.2 million, and a lot of those are older people. But what you find is that doesn't correlate with the Welsh language ones. And my assumption there is that older people don't tend to, because they don't understand the technology, or they've got somebody else to set it up for them, they're probably not aware of the other bits. So that 161,000 is probably an underrepresentation. But what's great for us is if you want to target people within those age ranges and demographics, you can just target those people, and it's far, far cheaper as well. So from a marketing point of view, your spend goes far, far further. So the way we operate, obviously, we're a publisher broadcaster, so we don't actually produce any of our own content. So we're dependent on the sector to do that. So we discuss with them in order to get that content going in. And I think one of the things we're looking at now is great that they're clipping up this content. So how do we then ingest that? So it's not just on Facebook and Twitter. How do we ingest it and put it out on our platforms? So when you go in to catch up, there will be categories for food. So all those cookery items that are being clipped and put on Facebook, how do we then pull them in and actually have them on our platform within our sort of structure? So when you go on Smart TV, you'll be able to watch that content within there. So it is something, and again, because it's something quite new as well, we're in discussions with the sector to see what works, what doesn't work. That's why we initially, you know, I said just sport, but then when graded over down to the people, we're just seeing huge impacts, you know, with these things. And we are seeing, and it's, you can't say for a fact, but when we put things like Boom, who make the series about horses that's moving at the moment, they've been putting clips on Facebook, they've been getting massive views, and they've been targeting, you know, societies and people like that. But the viewing figures last night for that had gone up from what they were previously. So you think, well, is there a correlation between that, or were people just tuning in just to see the subtitles? But that's another story. But it's interesting. But that's why we're trying to make the comparison now. But things that perform well on Facebook. So we had Ward Plant, so you know, Children's Hospital. Those go on S4C's Facebook. They were getting massive views. They were getting very, very good viewing figures. So you're hoping there is a correlation there. So that's what I'm trying to, and that's the complexities now with, we measure audiences by Barb, this is how many people with these boxes. So this is how you actually take these things in. So part of my job now is creating a narrative saying, this is how we're actually engaging with audiences, because with these platforms, these technologies, we can actually associate them with audiences, with, you know, sexes, ages, and it's a really powerful tool.
I'm very conscious of the time, so I'm thinking that maybe what we should do is have our hand.